Hi, I'm Jeff Richard, the creative director of Chaosium Inc., and I'm here with you on Legends of Tabletop.
Thank you for joining us, Jeff. I really do appreciate it. I'm so excited to hear about what we have going on at Chaosium. And what exactly is your role in Chaosium, and how did that come about?
Okay, I am the creative director for Chaosium, so I oversee the full creative process on all of our lines, Call of Cthulhu, RuneQuest, HeroQuest, a variety of board games, and then some other RPGs such as 13th Age in Glorantha and Mythic Iceland and a variety of others. And I've been doing that since June or July, right before Gen Con of last year, when Greg Stafford, the founder of Chaosium, and Sandy Peterson asked myself and Neil Robinson, Rick Mintz, and Michael O'Brien to take over the management and operations of Chaosium. And so each of us ended up doing what we do best, and those guys are awesome at doing more useful things like putting together distribution agreements and handling the finances and the accounts. So they gave me the hippie artistic role of being the creative director.
That's awesome. But I did hear something that I'm kind of unfamiliar with, Glorantha. I've been hearing a little bit of murmurs about it here and there, but tell me more about Glorantha.
Okay, Chaosium was actually founded in order to make games for Greg Stafford's Glorantha setting back in the mid-70s. Greg had written a whole bunch of stories about this fantasy setting and couldn't get them published in the magazines of the time, because back then what you did if you were an aspiring fantasy writer is you went to magazines and little journals and tried to get published. And he wasn't very successful doing that. So he figured what he would do is explore this setting with alternative media. And he created a board game called White Bear and Red Moon, which was set in his Glorantha setting. And it was the first real fantasy board game. And this is back in 1976, so quite a long time ago. And he had toyed around with using Grand Grimoire, which was kind of a very early D&D clone, to do role-playing games in Glorantha, but didn't like it. And then he was introduced to this guy, Steve Perrin, who said, "Hey, I'm one of the founders or early guys in the Society for Creative Anachronism, and I'd like to write a role-playing game for your setting." And Greg was asked him some questions. What would be different about this from D&D? He said, "Well, it's all going to be based on skills. People aren't going to become amazingly awesome as they adventure through it, but it's going to have one foot in reality and the other foot in fantasy." And Greg said, "That sounds fantastic." And the result was RuneQuest, and then that ended up becoming that same engine ended up becoming Call of Cthulhu. And so really Glorantha is at the core of everything that Chaosium started to do. And it's probably the best developed, it and Tecmo are the best developed fantasy role-playing game settings. It's one reviewer described it as if Tolkien's Middle Earth is a fantasy setting designed by a linguistic obsessive. So how obsessive Tolkien is about words and language and
oh, yeah.
Glorantha is a fantasy setting created by a mythology nerd. So somebody obsessed with Campbell and theories of the eternal recurrence and all sorts of comparative mythology. And so everything in that setting is driven by the mythology of the setting.
Mhm.
And then again, that same aesthetic runs through a lot of other Chaosium material, like Call of Cthulhu, like games like Nephilim, like when we did back when we did Stormbringer and Elric, and so on. But it's really kind of at the heart of the DNA of Chaosium.
Okay, and that leads into my next question for you. My fangirl is showing. How is the new RuneQuest edition coming along?
All fantastic. So what we did when we prior to joining Chaosium, we had a company called Moon Design, and Moon Design was the publisher and the owner of all things Glorantha. And one of our fanboy wishes, going way back when, was, God, wouldn't it be awesome if we could join back together with Chaosium and, you know, do RuneQuest, do a Chaosium RuneQuest the way we always thought it should be done. And lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. And so I've brought back Steve Perrin is now actively in the guy who originally wrote RuneQuest is actively involved on the new RuneQuest. I had Ken Rolston, who was very involved in the 3rd edition of RuneQuest before he went on to do glamorous and exciting things in the computer game industry, but then retired and has given us an immense amount of free time and work on the new RuneQuest, as well as Chris Klug, who wrote James Bond 007 back in the 80s, Dragon Quest, again, before going on and becoming a computer game designer, and now a professor over at Carnegie Mellon. And, you know, so we put together a really good team. And Jason Dural, who wrote the BRP Big Gold book, is doing the final edits of the core rules book. And so actually, I suspect we'll be done with the core rules next month. That doesn't mean we're going to release the book yet, because our plan is we really want to put RuneQuest to be our second major line. So we're actually going to release it after we've got 3 other books for it done, so that when it's released, it's not just a rule book, but it's a rule book. There's a bestiary. There's lots of material for GMs. There's a campaign book. And we figure that that's the best way for the people that have been waiting decades for there to be a new Chaosium RuneQuest. We figure they're willing to wait for it to be just done in as grand a fashion as possible.
Yes, I must admit, the only time that I played RuneQuest, it was really memorable.
You lost an arm?
Oh, it was so memorable. It was actually via, much like this, a Google Hangout. And the person that ran it was running from a very, very old source book that was falling out of its binding as he was finding things to tell us from the source book. So. Oh,
that sounds, prior to Rick doing that Kickstarter last year, for at the end of last year, we kickstarted the return of Classic RuneQuest. I was still running it using this beat up old copy that I swear has got to have been, well, geez, I think I bought it back in 81, 82. So it's, 35 years old. It was old enough to have kids in its own right. And, it was held together with duct tape.
Yes.
It is. RuneQuest is so hardwired into how I think about fantasy role-playing games. That it is, even though I've, Robin Laws and I co-wrote HeroQuest, the 2nd edition of it, RuneQuest is still very much just hardwired into how I think about gaming at all. It's just been my go-to system for pretty much, well, as long as I've been gaming. which is longer than I like to think about.
Well, we're going to go ahead and move on to Con of Cons. Tell me about.
Oh yeah. So have you seen that? Have you seen?
Just very briefly, I saw one little image of the board game, the intended packaging of it, and it's really cute.
Oh, it's awesomely cute. So Reiner Knizia put together this game for us. That's, you know, a game you can play, and you can play a set of it in less than 30 minutes, and you can play it with kids or adults or whatever. But it's a really simple game where you're running around. Everybody plays a Praxian tribe, and the Praxians ride are nomads that ride beasts. So bison and high llamas and zebras and sable antelope and bouncy little impalas and all sorts of goofy animals. And it's such a cute game. And the art, we got a fellow Ian O'Neill to do the art of it, and the art is just fantastic. It's just so darn cute. And we were at Essen last month, Essen Spiel, which is a huge board game convention in Essen, Germany. You know, imagine Gen Con, as many people as Gen Con, all playing board games.
Wow.
And just huge. And we were running constant games of Con-a-Cons, and just everybody loved it. It's simple, cute, and you don't need to know anything about the Glorantha setting to play it, other than, boy, it's so cute. You get people arguing about which animal tribe they want to belong to, you know, based on which they think is cuter, the person riding the bison or the person with the zebra. You know, it's a wonderful game.
Excellent. Now, your upcoming products for Christmas, right? Do you have anything that we should be able to look forward to regarding?
Yeah, we got two awesome things. Now, these are on the Cthulhu. We've got quite a bit that's actually coming out right, that we've just gotten finished printing and should be available for sale. So we have for Cthulhu, Pulp Cthulhu, which I believe you can now pre-order. And Pulp Cthulhu it's the Cthulhu rules if you want to give your characters a chance of surviving some of the campaigns. So, you know, your characters are just they're still going to go insane and die. They're just not going to die quite as fast. So the idea in Pulp Cthulhu is, this is if you want to have more of that Indiana Jones feel, where normally in Cthulhu, you know, you pull your gun out and you start shooting. That's the end of your character. They're dead. Yeah. They're gone. Whereas in Pulp Cthulhu, you know, if you're not pulling it out on the big mythos entities, but it's against the gangsters or the cultists, yeah, you can survive the firefight. You'll still, you know, when Cthulhu goes up and you lose all your sanity, you're still going to die horribly, but you're going to die horribly at the climax of the campaign, as opposed to
leading up and meeting 6 other same last name siblings to take place.
Oh, exactly. I mean, I can remember playing Masks of Nyarlathotep, and I cannot even remember how many characters I went through in order to play it. And Pulp is designed to have more of the feeling of that the pulp fiction of the 30s and 40s. You know, Doc Savage, the Man of Bronze, or Indiana Jones, or you know, folk that, you know, are two-fisted in confronting Nazis or cultists or whatnot, but it still keeps the fundamental key elements of Call of Cthulhu. Anyways, gorgeous book, wonderful. If I had my act better together, I would have a PDF here that I could share screen with you, but I wasn't that competent in planning ahead. The other one that we have on Call of Cthulhu that also is for sale for Christmas is Doors to Darkness. This is 6 new scenarios for the new edition, which again is just a beautiful book. And then we've got the Cthulhu coloring book, which I'm really excited about because I love coloring books.
Yeah, I really am looking forward to that. I think I've seen one little image of it.
Well, we got this fantastically talented artist to put together these just wonderful full plate images. Now he colored them, and then he stripped the color out for the final. But they are just fantastic renditions. And even if you don't ever plan to color in them, which embarrassingly I actually do, but even if you don't plan on them, it's just a cool thing to have around. And then the other one that I am actually most entertained by, and that I'm going to be giving to an awful lot of friends for their Christmas gift, is the H.P. Lovecraft for beginning readers, Call of Cthulhu, which is done in this incredibly, it's got the feeling and the look of a Dr. Seuss or a lot of the other childhood books. None of the characters whatnot, but it's so cute, ridiculously cute, telling Lovecraft's Call of Cthulhu story.
Oh.
And it's brilliantly done. It's actually true to, it keeps to the theme of the original story, but it's told in that iambic pentameter that we know from all of our children's books, and that will be available for Christmas. You should be able to pre-order it very soon, and okay. So we are super stoked about those. So it's that's 4 new products. And then we also have for Glorantha, we have the Coming Storm, which is a HeroQuest Glorantha supplement, but that's actually already for sale.
Excellent. Now, that just touched on my next one. Do you have any upcoming products or announcements? Of course.
Well, that was 4.
Yeah.
You want me to keep going on? Most of the rest are for 2017. We're doing we're finishing up the art right now for the Two-Headed Serpent, which is a big Pulp Cthulhu campaign that should be available first quarter of 2017. And that one there, it takes you, it's in that, as I said, that Pulp Cthulhu style. So it's a big, grand, world-traveling campaign, like a lot of the classic Cthulhu campaigns, that you don't have to necessarily go through a dozen characters in order to play. And then we've got the other one that we're doing finishing up the artwork for is a book we're calling the Grand Grimoire. And really what it is a GM and player's guide to all the magic spells that are used in Call of Cthulhu. But that in and of itself isn't very interesting, in my opinion. That's a spell book, and spell books in and of themselves aren't that cool. So what we tried to do is we tried to design this so that it artistically looks like the sort of stuff we would imagine these spell books to look at. And so it draws on all sorts of real world artistic traditions to just look as cool and bizarre as possible, as well as being a really useful game resource. And then both of those things are I believe those are the next 2 Cthulhu products to come out. And then we're finishing out the layout for another HeroQuest Glorantha book, which will also come out in the first quarter. And then after that, we've got just an awful lot of Cthulhu in the pipeline. And then we've also got the new RuneQuest in the pipeline.
Awesome.
Plus yet another board game for next year.
Can you tell us anything about
that? This is one that we were actually going to release this year, but we decided we would go with Con of Cons as our our first game of the new board game line. And that is a re-release and a redesigned version of a game Chaosium released back in the early 90s called Credo. And I'm going to give you the pitch for the game. And you're going to confess, I have to confess, it's a game, it's an awesome game. And it's actually crazy that we're publishing it. And what you are is you're playing a faction. How's this for nerdy? You're playing a faction at the Council of Nicaea. So this is the council that the Emperor Constantine, Roman Emperor, held to when he decided, okay, the Roman Empire is going to be Christian. What the heck do you Christians believe in? And so the emperor held this big council to figure out the doctrine of the new state religion, because he didn't know what it was. All he knew was, it had this magic sign, and that magic sign let him beat the heck out of his other rivals. And so he figured, hurrah, this shall be the new state religion. Tell me what you believe in.
Oh, gosh.
And so, and it just, you play factions in there, and you all have the things that you believe in, and they're determined by what cards you have. And you're trying desperately to have that be made part of the creed of this new religion. And they're all real world beliefs. They're all sects, and they're all tenets that were held by various groups in the 2nd and 3rd century, which means it's crazier than anything we could have ever made up.
Oh no.
Yeah, absolutely bug nuts crazy. But also what you're doing is you're scheming and backstabbing, and you're trying to screw over your fellow players, and you're trying to murder each other. Meanwhile, trying desperately to make sure that the emperor, and possibly more important, the empress, is on your side. And it's a wonderful card game. And we got a Bulgarian friend of mine, Colin Kadev, who does the Prince of Sartar comic, has done this amazing art that all looks like it's something that could have come off of some Eastern Orthodox fresco. And it's a game we like to joke. It's the only game that you could play with somebody that is in a seminary school, and at the same table have a devotee of Richard Dawkins, and they both would have a wonderful time. We did at Gen Con, we did a celebrity game of it with a friend of ours, Jonathan Tweet, who's he's very outgoing in his commitment to being a strong atheist. And so we had him play, and a couple of other friends, and then we also had the guy who has the Gamer Ministries also there at Gen Con, and they all played it, and they had a wonderful time. It's possibly the only thing the two of those guys could both agree on was that they had a blast playing it.
That's great.
Anyways, it's the sort of game that we're probably insane for publishing, but I always loved it. So, it's one of the ones we wanted to get back into print and make it very pretty.
Yeah, and especially at a time like now, you've got to have stuff that brings people together. You know.
But the other thing about it is, I love games where you play and you learn something at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a game. You may end up with weird Gnostic tenets of faith, and but you go in and I remember after the first time I played that way back in the early 90s, that actually it convinced me to read a tremendous amount about the late Roman Empire. So if games can convince you to read and learn something, then that's doubly awesome in my book.
Oh, definitely. I tell you what, Call of Cthulhu, I was introduced to that during a role-playing convention in the mid-90s. And I had never heard of H.P. Lovecraft. I couldn't have told you thing one about the man. or any of his stories. And immediately after, I had played the oh gosh, the module at that convention. It was ran by Michael Howard.
Okay.
And I mean, immediately after that, I went to the library. I read all of his stories, and yeah, it made me a fan.
Well,
Absolutely.
and that's one of the one of the things I actually absolutely love about being the creative director at Chaosium is that we put a huge amount of effort to make sure that our writers have the time to do the research, not just of the story, but the background of the story, and just the, you know, some of the crazy historical events, and real world places that get turned into Call of Cthulhu scenarios. I find that part of the process as fun as anything else in it. And boy, you just end up, you know, you end up learning so much absurd information about our world.
Yeah.
And actually, I have to say, all of our lines are like that. Glorantha is very much like that. You know, the amount of comparative mythology and Bronze Age and Iron Age history that I've read in order to put Gloranthan material together. Or one of our new books that'll be ready for next year, Mythic Iceland.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if it doesn't make you want to go out and grab a copy of Njal Saga or Egil Saga, then you're hopeless. But you know, that's a big part of what I think we try to do at Chaosium is to publish stuff that's just got this amazing body of information behind it.
And that you lived up to that with Call of Cthulhu, and it really introduced me to a whole new world of the pulps and not just Lovecraft, but the mythos and everything surrounding it. Durlith.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Have we managed to get you into reading any of Dunsany yet?
Not Dunsany. I do have it on my shelf. I haven't dove into it.
The great thing about Dunsany is his stuff is totally mad. It's very short. All of his stories are very, very short, so you can kind of delve into it. But they are the origin of almost all. It's kind of the backstory of almost all 20th century fantasy, from Tolkien to Lovecraft. All of that first generation of weird tales or epic fantasy, all had read or had been influenced by Dunsany. And I love reading it, things like that, because you read that and you go, oh God, I recognize that. But I've, you know, it's several generations back, which just entertains me to no end.
Okay.
Sorry, that's a bit of a. I know I'm going off a little bit on the tangent here.
No, this is great.
I mean, the other one that has a big influence on everybody on our writing team is an Argentinian writer, Jorge Borges, which he was. Can you
spell that last name for me?
Borges, Borges, sometimes called the founder of magical realism, but he wrote just a tremendous number of wonderful, crazy short stories in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, but was of great literary respectability. And he was one of the first respectable authors to say that Lovecraft's pulp stories were important literature in their own right. And he actually wrote several stories that were homages to Lovecraft. And that gave Lovecraft a degree of respectability they might not have otherwise achieved. And then, to tie it all back in, he was the biggest influence on Umberto Eco, who wrote Name of the Rose and Foucault's Pendulum, and tremendous. And then in Foucault's Pendulum, and I think in another book as well, he reintroduced Lovecraft elements into his highbrow New York Times best-selling stories. So, it all kind of goes full circle.
Awesome.
But yes, thank you for indulging my tangents.
Huh?
Thanks for indulging the tangent.
Oh, of course. Because speaking of fiction, I have in my hands this beautiful.
Isn't that fantastic?
Poem, Casilda's song. Now, what are we going to look forward to regarding?
Okay, so we've just brought on James Lauder to be the executive consultant to the new fiction line. And we're going to let James make all the announcements as to what the next series of books are. But we will be relaunching the Chaosium fiction line in the same way that we've been relaunching Call of Cthulhu and RuneQuest. So with much better marketing and much better presence than, it's one of the things that I'm actually saddened about, because Casilda Song is a fantastic anthology.
Yes, it is. It's gotten quite a few honorable mentions.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, deservedly so. My only complaint is more on our side, which is that I wish that we had managed to be able to give it the marketing support that it deserved. But we released it while we were still going on the rebuilding of the company in order to get the Call of Cthulhu 7th release out. And it's an absolutely awesome anthology, and it's kind of the template for what we hope everything going forward on the fiction line is going to be like.
Excellent. So you don't have any titles yet? You have?
Oh, we have titles. I'm just not. James will murder me if I spoil his fun. But basically, what we're going to be coming out with is about 4 books a year on the fiction line. Okay. And we will be using we will have a combination of brand new material like Casilda Song, with also one of the things that what we really are committed to doing is taking some of the material that's in the that had been previously published by Chaosium and giving it the treatment that it deserved. So better editing, better support, just more professional look, etc. Because there's some incredible gems that unfortunately were very poorly packaged, largely for financial reasons, that we would really like to get back into people's hands and have people take a second chance on it.
Okay.
So, yeah, that gets us somewhere into 2017, and then we've got actually the other big board game that we're working on. Again, is going back to kind of classic Chaosium, is that Chris Klug has been working for the last year and a half on redoing the board game that launched Chaosium, White Bear, Red Moon, and redoing that with modern sensibilities, having it be, instead of being an old style 70s war game where you moved, gigantic stacks of chits and your game took 6 to 8 hours. The idea is that for this to be something that, is card driven, it's still, moving, you move your armies around on a board, but you don't have your gigantic stack of chits. It's more like, more like a modern game, and can be played in less than 2 hours instead of 6 to 8, which is probably being generous. And
like pulling out original Risk.
Yes, Yes. Well, I mean, I've got. I don't know if you're much of a war gamer, but I come out of the the wargaming part of the hobby, and I have games that I so desperately want to be able to play a second time in my life, but I know it'll never happen because they take 40 or 50 hours to play.
Mm.
And you need 7 people that are willing to commit 40 to 50. They're one of my favorites is like a 100-hour game. I know I will never play that again. Yeah.
Hey, at least you got to play it once.
I got to play once. I did get to play Empires at Arms once. But yeah, so we've got, and then we've also got just an awful lot of material in the Call of Cthulhu pipeline. We have Lynn Hardy, who is a British writer, is doing a campaign book called Children of Fear for early next year, and that's another big multiple area Call of Cthulhu campaign, but this one is set more in China and Central Asia and South Asia, and it deals with things like Shambhala and Agartha. So the Theosophists.
Agartha.
Yeah, Agartha. They had the Theosophist hollow world inhabited by the invisible masters, where everything, the invisible masters, who are the secret college that rules the world, which you got to admit sounds pretty Call of Cthulhu.
It does.
And the great thing about it is Agartha is kind of a bastardized version of the Tibetan Shambhala, which is the mystical kingdom inhabited by a group of enlightened beings that is this magical perfect kingdom. And the founders of Theosophism, I think had been influenced by, and I'm going to butcher the names because I'm not looking at any of my notes, but there was a French writer, Yves Saint Laurent, or something like that, who took the Shambhala story and created the Agartha story, and then Madame Blavatsky turned that into kind of one of the core parts of Theosophistry. And so Lynn is running with that as hard and fast as she can to just make an absolutely crazy Call of Cthulhu campaign. And I'm really excited about this one. This is one of the first ones that the first books that I've been able to control from the very beginning all the way through. And so whenever Lynn comes back with well, have I gone too far with this? It's always not far enough. We've got to go crazier and wilder and screw with the players' heads even more. And I'm very excited.
Can't wait to see it.
Oh yeah, and then another one that we've got in the pipeline. American writer David Larkins is actually doing a series of 3 linked scenarios that are separated by a number of years in time, set in the Berlin of the early 20s, the mid 20s, and the early 30s. And Berlin, which is where I live, was a totally crazy, mad city. It was, it had a gigantic occult scene. It was filled with weird and goofy sects. Some of them turned out to be pretty nasty, frightening sects. But you just had this kind of city at the end of the world vibe going on there. And David is putting together this just wonderful set of 3 link scenarios where the real world NPCs are frankly crazier than any of the stuff that we've ever been able to come up with for fictitious NPCs, because it's just the period there. And then we've got we've got an awful lot of Call of Cthulhu in the pipeline. Sandy Peterson's The Tales of Sandy Peterson will be out next year, and that's a collection of 6 or 7 scenarios that Sandy, who created Call of Cthulhu, has written, and it's the first of at least 2 books in that series, and they're all one-shot scenarios where I've played in a couple of them, and they had some of the most fantastic turtle party kill.
Oh, nice.
Actually, we had one where the characters that killed themselves considered themselves to be the winners.
Oh.
I mean, but that's the great thing about
ones.
What was that?
They're the lucky ones.
We were the lucky ones. Yeah, it's
so would they be ideal for say convention settings? Do you have like maybe
absolutely
3-hour set amount of time? Do they come with pre-gens?
Yes, a lot of them come with pre-gens. I think all of them. I mean, I have to double check here, but I think all of them come with pre-gens, and they're just absolutely. And Sandy always runs the most entertaining, but absolutely messed up games. In that, if Sandy's your GM, that your characters are just going to die absolutely horribly, and you're going to have a wonderful time in the process.
Excellent. And those usually are the best ones.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's one of the things that really sets Call of Cthulhu apart from pretty much every other game out there, is that in Cthulhu, your character is probably not long for the world.
Oh yeah.
And that's part of the joy. Your character is this
universe.
Yeah. It's a cruel, harsh, and ultimately hostile universe that will destroy your character. But darn it, your character will heroically attempt to stop the demise of humanity, or at least postpone it.
Yes.
For some amount of time. And there's just something wonderfully liberating about that. And we do games that we have other games that are much more traditional RPGs. 13th Age of Glorantha, which I'm finishing up the art for. That's Rob Heinzo and Jonathan Tweet, and it's basically their director's cut of D&D set in Glorantha. Wonderful and awesome. And then there's RuneQuest, which is kind of somewhere in between. And when you're playing RuneQuest, you're trying to be a heroic figure, and you often have powerful magic, but you definitely have feet of clay, and you're definitely mortal.
Yes.
It's just something. It's something I really enjoy about our line of products, is that they are different from a lot of the role-playing tropes.
Yeah. That they are. And that's what really surprised me about RuneQuest, is because, yes, my character is pretty powerful, but I can't show it because of backstory.
Yeah.
And all of these limitations that are there, and you just do not know. You simply don't know. And it was really, really exciting for me to learn. And to play around in this new world. And I'm sure that the other players that I still play with them once a week, every week for I don't know how many years now, 3, 4. But yeah, bringing back something that we spoke of earlier.
Oh.
Can we expect to see any developments in the Plushie line?
Well, what we're doing right now is we've got a Redbubble store up for, this doesn't get us to the plushies, but it gets us for the other good ones, is we know we're really good at creating games and books.
Mhm.
We also know we're not very good at being t-shirt salesmen, but on the other hand, we have lots of cool art, and we have lots of cool images, and we have lots of iconic figures in Cthulhu, in Glorantha, and so on. So we set up a Redbubble store for Chaosium. That's not where we're doing the plushies. At some point, we will try and do a licensing agreement to set up a partner to do new plushies. Because as I was telling you before we started, I've got my Cthulhu plushie. My son loves it. He's 7 years old, and it's part of his stuffed animal collection that he sleeps with. And whenever I go to a convention or some sort of business related flight, my son always makes sure that I pack Cthulhu in my suitcase. And he has told me, Daddy, I know where you're going. You're going to RuneQuest Glorantha. You have to bring Cthulhu because that's where he lives.
That's excellent.
Oh yeah, no. The Cthulhu plushies, and another one that we really want to find some way. Again, we just need to find the right partner on that. It's those Con of Con figures. I mean, how awesome would that bison be?
Oh, it would be so cute. Oh my goodness. Yes, it would. It would, and I look forward to seeing that coming up in the future as well.
It's just that the reason we're not trying to do that internally is that prior to us coming in,
that the cost of developing and maintaining and inventory and all of that. So I mean, I could understand that being shoved down on the list of priorities, you know.
Oh, it's a fairly high priority. It's just that it's one of these things that when we think about phase 2 of the sort of stuff that we want to do, it's a after we reestablish all of the lines and make sure that everybody's gotten all their Call of Cthulhu 7 stuff, that they've all gotten their RuneQuest stuff, their 13th Age stuff, and so on and so forth, that then we can look at, okay, we've got this really cool stuff, and we're very good at developing licensing partnerships. You know, we've got a Call of Cthulhu computer game coming out next year with Focus Entertainment, which looks just absolutely fantastic. We've got David Dunham is coming out with a sequel to King of Dragon Pass, hopefully late next year, and that's a Glorantha computer game. You know, we're pretty familiar on the computer game side of things. It's just that we haven't quite figured out how you develop a partner for plushy toys, but by gum, we will.
Okay. Now, is there anything else that you would like to speak about that is or might be in the works at Chaosium?
Let's see. I've talked about Call of Cthulhu, and I'm absolutely certain that I will be getting an email soon from the line developer Mike Mason saying, "You forgot all about
Dreamlands."
Oh, yeah. Well, yes. Okay. So, yes, we will be doing. Actually, one of the ones that we're going to be commissioning art for very, very soon is the first of a series of Cthulhu books set in the Old West.
Ooh.
And I love the mythology of the American West. Absolutely love it. And because it's crazy, it's weird, it's got these, these grand heroic themes in it, and it also works really well for Cthulhu. And so we will be doing and putting a lot of art budget into having as visually striking a series of books there. And then we're probably going to actually do a independent role-playing game that's not Call of Cthulhu, also set in the West, that uses the a lot of the psychological issues that we're exploring with the new version of RuneQuest, which ultimately derives from Pendragon, which derives from RuneQuest again, to deal with the internal conflicts that Western characters always have. Because in almost all cases, the classic Western story is a story of redemption. It's about broken people trying to find some sort of meaning in their world, almost always through violent vengeance. But it's still, you look at the William Money character in The Unforgiven, which is a completely anti-heroic story of redemption. But basically there you have the character who is desperately trying to not be what he really is, which is a monstrous killer. And by the end of the movie, he embraces his monstrous killer, wipes out everybody in Big Whiskey, and then goes off to sell dry goods somewhere in San Francisco. But you also look at Tombstone. It's a story of redemption. High Noon, Shane, etc. And I just think that that's, we all think that that's something that is just ripe for a better treatment by role-playing games than it has been given.
Or even Blood Meridian and the Judge.
Oh, well, if we want to go down the Cormac McCarthy part, the Judge is my absolute favorite villain of all time. I mean, if we want to talk Cormac McCarthy, we could have an entire session, an entire episode of Legends of Tabletop, just about why gamers should read Blood Meridian.
Yes.
I mean, yes. I mean, that also, there you have bad men.
Yes.
Realizing that they're riding with worse than bad men.
Uh-huh.
And the themes that are woven into that. And you wonder, why has it never been used by gamers? Because it's so rich.
Yeah, there's so much there.
Oh, absolutely. So this is another project that will be for the next phase. We've got an awful lot of RuneQuest material. We're shooting for, ultimately we want to have a new Cthulhu book out every other month.
Okay.
And that's what we're building up the pipeline for. And but we've also, projects. Well, once we're into that stage, then projects that I've just always been like the old we haven't commissioned it yet, but we're doing the preparation for it. Is I really want to do Cthulhu campaign set in the later reign of Queen Elizabeth.
Okay.
So because you get in there, you get John Dee, you get pirates. This is the great age of Walter Raleigh and Francis Drake. You have the alchemist king of Bohemia, Rudolph, who's the emperor. You have Shakespeare. You have paranoia about the Spanish. All of that makes a wonderful setting that, again, has never really been very well used. And given the you've got Giordano, I'm butchering his first name, Bruno, who was the forerunner of the Rosicrucians. You've got just absolute bug nuts intellectual stuff going on with pirates. I mean, what could be cooler? I mean, pirates, crazy Kabbalists. I mean, it's like Reese's peanut butter cups, chocolate and peanut butter.
Yeah.
So yeah, these are the things that we're now hoping that we're once we're done with phase 1, we're able to push towards.
Okay.
So
now I am trying to be mindful of the time, and I do want to.
I'm having a blast. So.
Oh, okay, because I was going to say,
as long as you're having fun, I'm having fun.
Yeah, I'm having a great time. I just know that you probably have to sleep sometime, and if at any time you want to go ahead and call it a night, please let me know, because in the meantime, I was going to do something that we call here at Legends of Tabletop the Final 5.
Okay.
All right.
Unless there's anything else you want me to ramble and riff off, because I'm always happy with that.
Oh, we will. Until you are complete, this discussion is still in progress.
Awesome. Okay.
Video game or tabletop? Which one's your favorite and why?
Tabletop. Absolutely, without a doubt. The problem with and I've always attributed this quote to Uncle Ken Ralston, although he denies it, is that with video games, what we've managed to do is spend billions of dollars on R&D and amazing graphics in order to simulate the experience of a mediocre D&D game from the 1970s. It's fundamentally very linear. Even sandbox games are fundamentally linear in how you interact with the NPCs. So, if I'm playing Fallout 4, which is a beautiful, wonderful game, yes, but I want to go off script, I can't.
No.
Because there's only so many types of interaction that I can have with the environment other than blowing it up. Otherwise, it's pretty limited range of environment. Whereas with tabletop, my limitation is my imagination. That's it. And so if I'm running a game, what was that?
And hopefully a good GM.
Hopefully a good GM.
Yeah.
There is that.
Been there.
I mean, there is the human component of it. But for instance, my players will sometimes go on periods where they just want to do, if we're playing a Gloranthan game, they may want to spend 3 or 4 sessions doing nothing but court politics and social interaction and dealing with their cults and their temples. No combat at all. Mm-hmm. And forcing me as the GM to improvise everything. And then, of course, they want to have meaningful ramifications and consequences of their decisions, which I have to make up on the fly. A human being can do that. You can't predict ahead of time what is going to drive players' interest and what players are going to want to do. And that's the gigantic limitation of video games, in my opinion. They're pretty, and they can be an awful lot of fun, especially if you don't have a GM. But if I've got if I've got several players and somebody wants to run, I'll pick doing that 10 times out of 10 over playing a video game.
Very well said. Next question.
Okay.
Star Wars, Star Trek. I just added this one. Or for those that like neither of the previous selections, Dune. And why?
Dune?
Yeah.
Oh, Dune. Okay. That sucks because I like all 3.
Pick one.
Dune is the most awesome of the 3. The books, not the movies. I mean, I appreciate David Lynch's absolutely insane vision, and I still wish we could have seen Jodorowsky's. What?
Jodorowsky's Dune or
Jodorowsky's Dune.
Yeah,
If I mean, it would have been a glorious financial flop, and it would be something that I would own every little piece of paraphernalia with it. Dune is, of the three, Dune is my favorite. But I like the other. Well, sorry. Star Wars, I like the first three movies, not the sequels. And sorry, the first 2.5 movies. And then Star Trek, if William Shatner's not in it, I'm just not entertained.
Oh.
I'm an old school Star Trek guy.
Okay.
I want to see John F. Kennedy up on the Starship Enterprise flying around, dealing with Russian Klingons and Chinese Romulans. I mean, that's
okay.
But that's just me.
See, I tend to go more for, before I added Dune into the mix, I would tend to go more Star Trek just in general over Star Wars, because there's so much more content.
There is. But you know what I love about the old original Star Trek, as hokey as it is it's a Western. You know, it's a space Western. It's Firefly. It's, you know, Captain Kirk and his buddies are doing, you know, a buddy-driven Western. And, you know, go back to my previous discussion. I love Westerns.
Okay.
But Dune is infinitely cooler than Star Trek plus Star Wars.
Yeah.
Sorry, all my Star Wars friends and my Star Trek friends, but it's true.
Now, going into the comics arena of things, if you could have one superpower, what would it be and why?
That really comes down to what is your favorite comic book hero, isn't it? Because you're really copying and okay, my two favorite. I'm not going to answer your question directly. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm going to go with my two favorite comic book characters, and I would love to have either of their powers.
Mm-hmm.
And they're pretty radically different. I would either want to be John Constantine, right? Maybe not smoke as much as he does and have slightly a better life. But, you know, he's got cool stuff. He can deal with anyone. He's got these great necromantic powers, can bargain with entities infinitely more powerful than him, do all sorts of crazy stuff. And nonetheless, and he's got to be pushing, what, 55, 60 years old, he's still as cool as Sting. You know, I mean, who wouldn't want that? The other comic book hero that I embarrassingly have a tremendous fondness for is the old Captain America. Because he wasn't the cool, he didn't actually have any great superpowers. You know, but for some reason, you know, you have this team that's got, you know, Iron Man with his you know, multi-billion-dollar technology suit. You have the freaking Incredible Hulk, and you have the Scandinavian god of thunder. You know, infinitely powerful guys. But in order to figure out how to do anything, they go, well, Captain America, tell us what we're supposed to do. You know, it's like, yeah, I'm a World War II vet, and I've got a shield. And you know, for some reason, I just, you know, it's not a great power, but for some reason, I find the character is so entertaining that, you know, basically his superpower is clearly to convince, infinitely more impressive people than yourself to just do what you tell them to do. And, you know, so, you know, John Constantine, Captain America, I know it's not really the answer to the question, but to me, that's more entertaining than would I want to have invisibility? Would I want to have telekinesis? I'm more entertained by the characters.
Yeah, that's true. I did just see Doctor Strange in IMAX.
I enjoyed that. I enjoyed it. I had fun. It
Oh,
was
you
such
did?
yeah, it was so psychedelic. The plot, I paid no attention to the plot or the character development. I just sat there and went, wow, wow, this is just visually, this is what, you know, they were trying to do with the Inception, but they just turned it up to 11. And and it's like going back to, you know, the ultimate version of Dune. Do you really think that Jodorowsky's plot would make any sense?
Who
And would
will
you care?
ever know?
Would you care?
No.
Would you want? No, of course not. You would be.
No,
you would,
it's just like the Holy Mountain. I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
even
exactly. Exactly. I don't even know what the plot is of the Holy Mountain, and I don't care. I just sit there. I want to be astounded by the sheer artistic chutzpah of the whole thing, and that's why I enjoyed Doctor Strange. Is that artistically, I went, wow.
Yeah.
I'm going to pay no attention to the plot. I'm just going to sit there and watch the attempts to create Steve Ditko's weird ass images.
Mm-hmm.
And can we get rid of the characters? I just want to watch the skyscrapers melt around each other because that's just too cool to see. But
keep the time loop going a little more.
Exactly. I mean, there's a big part of me that I'm willing to accept that plot and character is sometimes not as important as just sheer crazy chutzpah.
Mm-hmm.
I know, and that's not really answering your question again.
Marvel or DC?
Okay, I'm a Marvel kid. Now, I grew up in Marvel. I grew up reading the Hulk and Avengers, and heck, I even remember when the X-Men special came out that introduced the Wolverine and all those other characters. On the other hand, I have a soft spot for the Justice League. Okay. So,
sci-fi or fantasy?
That's a tough one. An awful lot of fantasy isn't very good. Mm-hmm. I mean, an awful lot of it.
Okay.
On the other hand, I always end up coming back to fantasy. You know, I love science fiction. I love the exploration of intellectual, scientific, and sometimes just philosophical questions. Mm-hmm. But somehow I always end up coming back to Robert E. Howard and Conan and, you know, the epic. And I think that fundamentally is that when fantasy is done right, it does a better job of hitting that Joseph Campbell hero's journey than science fiction is normally capable of pulling off. And so
it's the literary comfort food of the ages.
Well, yeah, but that's why I think that's part of what we're hardwired as human beings. We're ultimately creatures that think in terms of mythology and myth. And fantasy, when done reasonably well, plays around with myth and the unconscious better than science fiction can do, except at its absolute pinnacle. As background reading for some of the stuff that I'm working on, I recently read Carl Jung's The Red Book. I don't know if you've ever looked at part of that. But it's this private book that Jung had where he wrote down in kind of a story form his dreams over a 5 to 6 year period. Totally batshit crazy. Wonderful fantasy stuff there. Great fodder for stories. But it's fantasy. It's, when done right, fantasy always has a one foot in the unconscious world of mythology, and that's really hard for science fiction to do. So I'm going to say that's a really long and windy way to get back to saying fundamentally fantasy.
Okay. And thank you for the Young reference, by the way.
Oh, if you've never read it, totally recommend. It's got this wonderfully, just huge amounts of wonderfully weird stuff, and it absolutely makes total sense why Jung never wanted it published, because he was afraid of the damage that it would do to his reputation as a scholar and scientist. But as a artistic reference, it's gloriously nuts. And fantasy, when done reasonably well, fantasy lets us play around with that part of us that's not in the rational, objective, structured world of reason. And that's where all the interesting parts of the human experience is. Whereas science fiction finds it really hard to get out of that, by its very nature, that again, with one big a giant exception, is Dune science fiction or is it fantasy?
Mm-hmm.
And I would say it's fantasy, not science fiction.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, just the fact that oh man. Not just fantasy or sci-fi, but that falls more in the realm of speculative.
Well, very much so, but a tremendous amount of stuff that goes on to that is that Herbert is playing around with is mysticism.
Yeah.
And you think about the issue of having a god king, which to me sounds more like a fantasy issue, a nearly omniscient god king. Well, what room does that give for human free will? That to me is more of a fantasy speculation than a. But again, it's just me. Well, okay, I think that's 4 questions. Is there a 5th, or is that the 5th one?
No, we went through all 5.
Oh, we went through all 5. Okay, I just can't count.
We went through all 5, and so all that I'm doing right now is just make sure that anybody else hasn't thrown any others that I haven't brought up into the mix. And no one has. I think I've been pretty thorough in this interview here, and I do thank you so very, very much, Jeff.
Well, this has been an absolute blast. I am always happy to ramble and wander off on bizarre literary tangents.
Oh, that's the most fun.
Oh, I mean, the kind of going back to the creative process that we have at Chaosium is the reading lists that we have, jumps from Jung to I mean, if I was going to ask annoying questions, it would be more along the line of, what is cooler, Gilgamesh or Norse sagas? Come on. Gilgamesh or Norse sagas? Iliad or Lord of the Rings? Which do you go for?
Iliad.
What's the coolest? You rock in my book.
I'm just gonna have to say that just because it has inspired a much wider range of people.
Yeah, but I also think think about the whole core story is you have this in the Iliad. The whole story is the destructive anger of Achilles, the petulance of Achilles. And you think about, Lord of the Rings, which is a fantastic story, and I don't mean to diss Professor Tolkien. But the characters' motivations in that are nowhere near as human to me is the characters in the Iliad who do fantastically stupid things on top of fantastically stupid things on top of fantastically stupid things.
Right.
And let's see, other one, science fiction, Ursula Le Guin or Larry
Ursula
Niven?
K. Le Guin, yeah.
Or Larry Niven?
Oh. Oh God. See, I would definitely say Ursula, but there was something that I read from her that just made me shut the book. But then again, is that a detriment? No. It caused a reaction. It caused me to react. Niven hasn't caused me to react that emotionally.
Oh, no. I actually, there's like no emotional connection with Niven.
No.
What I find though is, and again, this is just me, I find I go back to Niven though more, even though I have no emotional connection.
Okay.
So,
because I think it just might be how I operate more on an emotional than intellectual, maybe.
It could be. It could also be that I'm just entertained by giant cats. But no. I mean, these are anytime I am happy to play the question of what is a more interesting influence or medium, because there's a lot you can run with that. A lot of questions you can ask to it.
Absolutely. Jeff, I just want to take this moment to thank you so very much for the time that you have dedicated to this broadcast. And we here at Legends of Tabletop are extremely thankful to you and Chaosium for the contributions that you have made to our lives and in the gaming community in general. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And good night.